The 5-star dancer Lemaire has been announced to release an EN on the 10th of April, and since I have a history with her, I felt like I could make a video covering this unit. First, since I've seen a few people who didn't even know of her existence before the announcement, I'll go over the concept of her character. Lemaire is a hybrid shield shaver and buffer. She has 6 elemental skills, each targeting a separate element, and 3 of those skills have a specific buff attached to them. This way of buffing comes with both an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that she theoretically has good action economy. She can buff and shave shields in the same action. The disadvantage is that these buffs aren't extendable by boosting. So you can't max boost once and get 6 turns like you would with someone like Lynette. Let's go back to her advantage. The issue with this gimmick of hers is that it's dependent on weakness. If the enemy isn't weak to fire and you want her to buff attack, she loses to a real buffer like Lynette since she's no longer shaving shields. If the enemy isn't weak to ice and you want her to buff defense, she's going to be strictly worse than a unit that focuses on defense like Harley or Ophelia. So she's not very competent as a buffer. And she's even worse in the damage department. Her skill potencies are all very low, starting at the 3x65 potency base, going up to 3x120 at max boost. For comparison, this is the same max potency for Trifold Slash, Trifold Thrust, Triple Sturdy Shot, and other similar skills. That's why earlier on I called her a shield shaver rather than a damage dealer. Now, chances are, if you've heard of Lemaire before, you've probably seen some hype for her ability to hit every element. In fact, that might be the only thing people knew her for. You might have even heard people claim she has great coverage and therefore is good for new players, or that she's good for general teams. This is mostly nonsense. First, CotC enemies have different weaknesses, so leaving one element uncovered is a huge deal. You almost always have the option to target other weakness if the first one isn't available, and enemies with limited weaknesses, such as the level 100 NPCs, are usually hard content that you wouldn't want to bring Lemaire or non-specialized teams along for anyway. And there's no situation where you need to have a unit that's capable of hitting all 6 elements in a battle. Not to mention, Lemaire isn't capable of hitting all 6 elements normally. At A0, she only has 3 skill slots, meaning she'll only be bringing 3 skills to a battle, or 3 elements covered, same as Cyrus. Of course, she does have her ultimate and her final skill, which attacks with each element once, but like every multi-weakness skill, both of these are impractical. Bringing a scholar with Analyze would be a better way of scouting elemental weaknesses than resorting to these options. Cyrus is a relevant comparison because he was the best damage dealer at all 3 of his elements when he released, on top of all of his skills being AoE. Lemaire is none of these things, making her so much worse. So, hopefully by now we've all gotten over the hype for her gimmick of hitting every element. Let's go through all of the parts of her kit separately. Her first passive gives her +1 turn extension to all buffs. This means you don't have to equip a Brave Fan on her, as its effect doesn't stack. Her second passive gives her +20% damage when targeting weakness, discouraging you from using her skills if it doesn't hit weakness, even if you want its buff. Now for her skills. Her first skill is the 3-hit win skill that reveals a weakness if it hits. This is basically an overpriced Analyze, costing 40 SP and only revealing 1 weakness regardless of boost level. Her next skill is Pure White, a 3-hit light skill that heals your front row after an attack. Niche doesn't even begin to describe how irrelevant this skill is. It can be useful in the Dancer Tower, and that's about it. Now we move on to her first hybrid buffing shield shaving skill, Enlivening Yellow. This is her lightning skill. It buffs crit and speed. In other words, it's useless for actual lightning teams. You'd be better off bringing Elvis or Therese, who both can lower lightning resistance down, a much more useful effect. Let me stress this again. When you bring Lemaire to an elemental team, she has to apply a relevant and useful buff or debuff with that element. Speed and crit are not particularly wanted in lightning teams, so you can start to see why she falls short. Her next 2 skills raise elemental resistance. I've only used these skills to test them out, and all I can say is that there's no fight in the game that will make you say, man, if only I had Lemaire for 15% wind resistance. And as a general rule, defense buffs are better than the resistance buffs in this game. Speaking of defense buffs, her next 2 skills, Passionate Red and Tranquil Blue, offer attack and defense buffs respectively. These aren't useless like the ones before, though for buffing attack and fire teams, you have better alternatives. Namely, the number 1 reroll target, Lynette, one of the 8 starters. So really, only Tranquil Blue is anything decent here. Her last skill is Rainbow Collage. It's dog shit, so let's move on to her ultimate. Vibrant Palette is basically a stronger Rainbow Collage that comes with ultimate buffs. Since it's an attack, the base duration of the buff doesn't increase at ultimate level 10, remaining at 2 turns, and the effect is only half of Lynette's. Finally, I would like to share a personal story about my experience using this unit. I pulled the Lemaire very early on in my JP account, so she came by when I had a less developed roster. However, despite not having that many 5 stars, I kept taking her out of my party and leaving her on the bench. Why? Well, if you didn't notice until now, she is extremely SP hungry. All of her hybrid buffing skills cost 74 SP, and for earlier levels, she's unusable. Remember, Lemaire's playstyle is built around repeatedly using these skills to shave shields and buffs simultaneously. So, you're expected to be sustaining 74 SP every turn you want her to shave shields. That's just not reasonable for new players. These skills never lower an SP cost, by the way. Instead of unlocking SP saver at certain levels, they get increased duration. I realized I skipped her dark skill earlier, so I'll go over it here. Noble Purple is one of her better skills because elemental attack debuffs aren't that common, and it costs only 56 SP instead of 74 like the others, and that's the best thing I can say about it. Lemaire is a terrible unit with practically no redeeming qualities. This gimmick of being able to shave shields and buff at the same time is really all she has. And as we know by now, it's just not practical. And I haven't even started talking about her horrible banner structure, a paid step up and 150 pulls to guarantee the unit. That's a potential 4.5k rubies lost going for this unit. So do I recommend pulling for Lemaire? Absolutely not. In fact, I advise everybody to skip her banner. The player base needs to get the message across to Square Enix that these bad value banners aren't going to make them profit. Before the Chrome Rood trio came to EN, we had a free step up and a spark at 100 pulls for every gent pull unit, but now they're sold like this. People joked about how bad of a value Nina Lena's paid step up banner was, but despite the memes, she did have something of a niche. Lemaire has nothing, even her A4 is a joke. Bad stats and the same effect as some free accessories. So avoid this banner. If you're whale, if you're free to play, if you're a low spender, avoid it. And hopefully, if it bombs badly enough, Square Enix will bring back free step-ups for Gen pull units.